Hey everybody, welcome to the channel, True Crime Stories. If you're new to the channel, please hit that like button and subscribe so you can hear more. Thanks for stopping by. Appalachian Unsolved. In the small community of Cosby, Tennessee, someone knows who killed Roger Hooper. Hooper, age 26, was ambushed one night in February of 1991 when he came home from a high school basketball game. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation is convinced that one person knows who ambushed 26-year-old Roger Hooper outside of his Cosby, Tennessee home. Well, yeah, one person does know, the person that did the shooting. There are people out there that know things about this case that have never talked about it. There have been people who've been asked and they didn't tell. Roger Hooper was ambushed in February of 1991 when he came home from a high school basketball game. Now, they did interview Shannon Hooper, who was only 13 years old at the time, and he was Roger's cousin. Now, he had gone to this basketball game that night with Roger and some other people. And after the game was over, Roger dropped Shannon off at his house, which was only 2 doors away. He went inside his house, Shannon did, and not long afterwards he heard gunshots. Shannon didn't think anything of it at first, but after a few minutes, someone called his house. They started shouting around the neighborhood, someone's been shot, someone's been hit. So everyone ran to go find out what was going on, and Shannon just says, we have a pretty good idea of who killed my cousin Roger that night. Everyone kind of knew what was going on with this other case where Roger had been shot at 2 months prior to this, and the man had been brought in for questioning. He had been arrested, and he was awaiting trial on that. He had shot at Roger, and the bullet ricocheted and hit a passing by truck on the highway, busted the window out of that truck, and that truck, the glass from that window cut a man's arm up. The man stops, pulls over to the side to find out what's happening here, how my window get broken. He finds the bullet, and he calls the police. Well, they brought the man in for questioning, and he was awaiting trial, but he was allowed out on bail while he was awaiting his trial for this. He had 4 days until the hearing when Roger Hooper was shot and killed. Now, Roger Hooper was married, and his young wife, Kim, and they lived in a mobile home on Cosby Highway. He worked as a courier for an antique broker. Now, I don't know if that had anything to do with this. I could not find anything. I checked as many websites as I could find for Roger Hooper, and I could not find anything giving me any idea how these two men knew each other, what kind of relationship they'd had, if this had something to do with this high school basketball rivalry or a neighborhood argument or anything. I couldn't find anything as to how the two men come into contact with each other that led to this man wanting to shoot Roger Hooper. The night of February the 22nd, 1991, Roger went to a basketball game, and after the game, he came home. He dropped his cousin Shannon off. Shannon says nothing unusual happened that night. It was a Friday night high school basketball game. It ended about 10 o'clock, and everyone went home. And Shannon and his older sister and one of her friends were dropped off at their home 2 doors away from Roger's house. Roger pulled into his gravel driveway and started for the back door. Someone was lying in wait. Investigators believe that someone was lying upon a nearby cemetery above Roger's double wide, and as he walked up onto his back porch steps, he was shot. Kim Hooper was alone inside the mobile home, and she heard these gunshots ring out, and she went to the back door to look out to see what was going on. Roger Hooper suffered gunshot wounds across his upper body, and this was a shotgun. He had been shot with a shotgun. Several shots had been fired. Hooper dropped his keys and fell onto his back, and this is how his wife found him. Kim was pregnant at the time with their son. The Cobb County Sheriff at the time, Shannon Hooper, says, "We heard the loud gunshots. We had several guns and we were always shooting at something, and we didn't give it any thought until one of the neighbors ran up to the house and said somebody had been shot." Hooper was laid to rest 3 days later. His headstone reads, "Love is eternal," and his signature was put onto his coffin. Detective Robert Caldwell worked for this county sheriff's office for 37 years. He was a lifelong resident of the area. He was very reluctant to say too much during this interview. He didn't want to jeopardize the possibility that charges could be brought. He says someone out there does have key information that will help solve this case. This is a good community and everyone likes each other here. It's good people here. But apparently someone didn't like this Roger Hooper for whatever reason. They had some problem with him. This man, Donnie Webb, had fired a pistol at Roger Hooper. The same day, Hooper charged Webb with reckless endangerment. And records do not state how the two men knew each other. Hooper voluntarily dropped the charge or the warrant against this Donnie Webb. But then the men got into an argument during another high school basketball game on February the 8th. Hooper then went back to the police and asked them to reissue the warrant. A preliminary hearing was set for Tuesday, February the 26th, and Webb was allowed to remain free on bond. Hooper was shot and killed 4 days before this hearing. Authorities located Webb in Virginia a few hours after the killing and told him he needed to immediately come back home. He returned and talked with the agents. During the interview, the defendant admitted that he shot the pistol at the exit ramp. He doesn't say. He would later try to suppress that statement in court. He doesn't say that he was shooting at Roger Hooper, but he does say he shot the gun. He was ultimately convicted in this reckless endangerment case. However, he was never charged with Roger Hooper's murder. And efforts to reach him for this interview were unsuccessful. So it's been 34 years. Agent Newport believes the person who killed Hooper is still around. He says, "I believe that he still lives right here in the county." Numerous people were interviewed, including Kim Hooper, who later remarried, but she was ruled out as a suspect. The agent declined to say what they believe might have led to this killing. Shannon Hooper said his family knows who killed Roger without a doubt. It's absolutely heartbreaking that something like this can happen and you feel like your family is forgotten about. You feel like people have not done their job. A man is allowed to walk free. Once he's shot at someone, caused damage to someone else's vehicle and bodily injury to this other man who was driving this truck, and he was allowed to remain free on bail. Was this a hit? Did this man put a hit out on Roger? So he had an alibi, but did police really look into that alibi to make sure that he was legitimately out of town? Did anyone remember seeing him at this basketball game? The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation continues to work on this case, and people have their theories and people know things and have heard the rumors and the talk, but you can't convince a jury of, hearsay. So that's kind of where everything stands with this Roger Hooper case, and to this day, no one's ever been arrested. The family's still waiting for answers all these years later. They may never get those answers, sadly. The defendant, Donnie Webb, appeals his convictions of 2 counts of reckless endangerment, for which he received concurrent sentences of 2 years in the state penitentiary and fines totaling $3,000. All but 90 days of those sentences were suspended. The state alleged and apparently proved to the jury that both Roger Hooper and Robert Williamson, Jr. were placed in imminent danger of death or bodily injury by the firing of a single shot. The charge was voluntarily dismissed on December the 24th. Later, in February 1991, the defendant and Mr. Hooper exchanged words during a high school basketball game, and Mr. Hooper had the warrant reissued. The defendant was notified of this development and went to the Cobb County Sheriff's Office on February the 9th, 1991, at which time the warrant was executed. During the course of making bond arrangements and after joking about the matter, the defendant told the dispatcher, "I want a lawyer," then telephoned the General Sessions Judge's office and got the bond approved. A preliminary hearing was set for February the 26th, 1991, and the defendant was released on bond without being questioned about the incident. On February the 22nd, 1991, Roger Hooper was murdered. On that date, the defendant, his wife, and child were en route to Washington, D.C. when the sheriff of Cobb County telephoned the defendant in Virginia at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and told him that he was in big trouble and that he should go immediately to the sheriff's office. The defendant returned to Tennessee, and on February the 24th, 1991, he telephoned the sheriff's office. He was asked to report to the sheriff's office, and he did so. The defendant testified that Agent Haynes, this is the agent that's questioning him, told him that he would not discuss the pending reckless endangerment charges, but only wanted to ask him questions about the homicide. The defendant said that the agent read him his Miranda rights, and he told the agent, "I guess I need a lawyer." To this, the agent told him, "You do not need a lawyer if you haven't done anything wrong." Agent Haynes denied that either of these statements were made. The defendant admitted that he never told Haynes directly that he wanted a lawyer. During the interview, the defendant admitted that he shot a pistol on the entrance ramp on I-40 at the Wilton Springs exit. Later, the defendant filed a motion to suppress this statement, asserting that it was obtained in violation of his rights to counsel and his Miranda rights. The trial court found that the defendant's request for counsel came in the context of casual conversation and could not be really considered an assertion to the right to counsel. So basically they upheld the court's decision and said that he really didn't ask for an attorney on appeal. So basically they're saying his rights weren't violated, that he really didn't ask for an attorney. This article was written in 2020, so it's been 35 years, and they still have made no arrests in this. They brought this man in, the same person in, for questioning. He claims to have had an alibi, and the police were not able to prove that he didn't. Everyone knew, everyone had their instincts that this was related to the shooting incident that had taken place earlier. Before I move on into the next part of this story, I would just like to remind everybody, if you haven't already, to please like the video and subscribe to the channel. This happened in the Townsend area in eastern Tennessee in 2015. A Townsend man is still looking for answers after his father was found dead in his camper trailer. No one wants to get the news that your father's been murdered. That's pretty much the worst news you can get, said Evan Myers. I was on call that day, said Sergeant Mike Surratt with the Blount County Sheriff's Office. He was called to a home in a wooded area off East Lamar Alexander Parkway. There was a deceased male inside the camper trailer. It was 47-year-old Stacy Myers. My dad was a very friendly guy. Anyone who knew him would tell you that. He was so humorous. He was always telling jokes. He loved having a good time, and he was very friendly. He was my best friend. Stacy Myers' son Evan was only 21 years old when his father was murdered. He remembers the text that delivered him the worst news he ever read. I think the exact words were, "They just found Stacy dead." Stacy Myers was hosting a barbecue that Sunday. His son said his friends arrived to find his body. You have garbage cans and furniture sitting around outside, 5-gallon buckets, a lot of aluminum cans, beer cans, soda cans. Just a lot of stuff in disarray, said the police detective. It was hard to tell if someone had tried to rob Myers. The camper where he lived was very small, and the space was disheveled to begin with, so they couldn't really determine if someone had come in there and just rambled through everything, thrown things around, or if it was just always kind of a messy place. 20 different police officers there everywhere. There were only 4 other houses on that road. Surratt said they canvassed the area and only one person heard or saw anything that afternoon. We had a lady there that said there was a Chevy pickup truck that had been there earlier with loud pipes. So we started looking around trying to track down that truck. The fact that no one heard a gunshot is rather surprising to me, said Evan Myers. Execution style to the back of the head is how Stacy Myers was shot. The official autopsy has never been released because the investigation is still open. I want to say it was the detectives that said that, said Evan Myers. At first he said he was beaten with a wrench and then he was bludgeoned to death. But then they changed their story and said he was shot in the back of the head with a .22 caliber. He was sitting in the corner of his camper at his computer. So he's sitting at his computer he's sitting at a table or a desk facing his computer. Was his back to the door? Did someone just walk in? Did he hear this truck pull up and recognize the sound of this truck and know that this was one of his friends or someone he knew? So he's just like sitting there waiting on them to knock on the door or knock to come in. And he doesn't bother to get up because he's just going to say, "Come on in." And before he knows what happens, they come in and shoot him. He'd been in and out of jail a lot for DUIs, so he wasn't the best person to some people in the community. He had some domestic and stuff with his wife, but he was still a good person. Stacy Myers was an amputee, and he was prescribed painkillers, and he usually was known to keep a lot of money on him. Do police or others in the community believe that he might have been selling some of these painkillers? Did someone come there to purchase or to sell him some painkillers, and maybe they saw that he had this money? Was his money taken? If it was over money or drugs, the most they would have gotten would have been about $300, said his son. Apparently that is the price for his life. And we all know the stories of how addictive painkillers can be. And some people, I've heard stories of people getting killed and beat up and, robbed for lesser amounts of money and prescription medication. Police officers responding to the scene said they believed that whoever did this knew the victim. It was probably someone he was expecting to stop by his home that day, and he was trusting them enough to open the door for them. The camper is now gone, and Myers' mother said she couldn't bear to see the place where her son was killed. She pretty much gave up on life after my dad was killed. She just lost her will to live, said Evan Myers. It was the hardest thing of my life, having to take a paint scraper and scrape your father's dried blood off the walls. His family no longer owns the land, and the camper and his grandmother's home have both been sold. It's so frustrating knowing that the killer of my dad is still out there. I think people know what happened, and someone needs to come forward. If you know anything about the murder of Stacy Myers in Blount County, Tennessee, please contact the Sheriff's Office at 865-273-5000. Before I move on into the next part of this story, I would just like to remind everybody, if you haven't already, to please like the video and subscribe to the channel. A stay-at-home mom solves a 37-year-old missing person case. This was dated June 23rd. Barbara King Ladd was laying in bed one night in her Marion County, Tennessee home after she had put her kids to bed and was reading a local article. Within an hour, using only her phone, she connected the dots between an unidentified body found near a creek in 1985 and a missing persons case in Georgia. That body belonged to Donald Boardman. Donald Boardman was 36 years old when he vanished after he had bought a new Camaro. For 37 years, his family had no answers until Ladd, an elementary school life coach with no law enforcement experience, solved the mystery that had stumped 2 police departments and the FBI. She sent her tip to the local police department's Facebook page, and it was picked up by a crime analyst. This crime analyst named Lori Bradburn helped confirm the identity through DNA. While Boardman's family finally has closure, many questions remain. Who killed him and why? And why did the details resurface? Decades-old theories, misconnections, and a troubling lack of answers. Don Boardman was a man who disappeared from Atlanta, Georgia on November the 23rd, 1985. His body was found in Marion County, Tennessee, later that same year, but remained unidentified until May of 2022. Don Boardman grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and was popular in high school. As an adult, he worked at his father's gift shop, which had locations all over Florida. He had been married twice, and after his second divorce, he moved away from the gift shop business and opened a non-alcoholic nightclub called Sky Feathers. The nightclub had its license taken in 1985 after allegations of fraud. Now, this was the same year that this man went missing. So was there some connection to his murder and this situation with this nightclub? Did he owe investors money or anything like that? Don disappeared from a health fair at a convention center shortly after he had purchased a new white 1985 Camaro. At the time of his disappearance, he talked about getting away and starting over. He was reported missing to the Chambly Police Department. Weeks later, law enforcement discovered the Camaro, a jacket, and credit cards in East Point, Tennessee. 2 men and a woman were found inside of the vehicle, owned a body shop, and was known to have a criminal record. Several purchases had been made on Don Boardman's credit card. On December the 16th, 1985, a man fishing discovered remains in a creek near Interstate 24 in Marion County, Tennessee. The cause of death was a blow to the head. The body was fully clothed. Decades later, Marion County resident Barbara King Ladd read an article about the murder victim. She began checking missing persons websites from Tennessee and neighboring states. When she saw Don's picture and his case, she reported it to the police department's Facebook page. She said, "Has this person ever been checked into to find out if the remains that were found could possibly have been him?" Crime analyst Lori Bradburn was the first to see the message and responded. She tracked down Don's sister in Florida and was given a DNA sample. The victim was identified as Don in May of 2022. They used his sister's DNA to make a match. At the time of Don's identification, the 2 males who had been found in his car had both since died, and investigators were looking to try to get into contact with the woman who had been found with these men. So after all these years of not knowing what happened to their brother, their son, it was finally revealed that he'd bought this car. He'd just bought the car. I don't know if he'd just bought it that day or weeks earlier or days earlier, but I think he was targeted for the car, possibly because these people wanted to resell this car. Boardman was last seen at a health fair at the Convention Center in Atlanta, Georgia on November the 23rd, 1985. Now, this is an archived Charlie Project. This is from before he was discovered, his identity was made. His white 1985 Camaro with gold trim disappeared with him. All these items were later found in the possession of a known criminal. I don't know if that person was ever charged with anything. Without this man's remains, without them being able to find out where he was at, I don't know what they maybe could have charged him with, just the credit card, using this man's credit card, if they were able to prove that he had. But this woman was just scrolling through her phone one night. She happened upon this article about these remains having been unidentified for so many years, and she just decided to snoop around, to sleuth, and she went on to some websites about missing persons in Tennessee and Mississippi and other areas surrounding Tennessee, found this man's photograph, and put 2 and 2 together and helped solve this case. Thanks for watching.